when someone says, so what do you do? And I think what you answer at that point really defines you subliminally and to the other person.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ella Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe is interviewing Andro Donovan. Joe was introduced to Andro via Paula Gardner from show number 2. They did the interview quite a while ago before Joe took a break whilst developing her products, so she's really pleased to be getting this out to you now. Andro Donovan, author of Motivate Yourself, is a globally sought after facilitator, speaker and consultant. She specialises in coaching high-performing CEO and entrepreneur forums to become more effective leaders with a stronger sense of meaning and purpose in their life. She combines her 20 years' experience as a management consultant with her natural insights and affinity with all types of people to help her clients gain greater influence, effectiveness and perspective. She's best known for her life-changing fulfillment retreats for top executive forums around the world who are exploring their own personal development and making a difference. Back to the studio.
So today I'm interviewing Andro Donovan, author and leadership coach. So really pleased to have you with me, Andro. How are you?
Hello there. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yes, I'm good too. So tell me a bit about you, what you do and where you do it. I always sound like Cilla Black at this stage.
Well, I suppose I'm gathering titles as I get older, but basically I am an author. But my main job is I facilitate off-site retreats for chief executives and entrepreneurs and business owners. And the retreats are really designed to have them feel they can bring their best work into their world, whether that's through being a better leader, father, husband. You know, the subject matter is quite broad because it's kind of whole life coaching.
Right, okay. So those will be at venues. Where are you when you're not at those venues?
When I'm not at the venue?
Yes, when you're not running a retreat. Do you work from home?
When I'm not running a retreat, which can happen anywhere in the world. I am in my lovely country house in Wiltshire, in Salisbury, where I can relax and surrounded by lovely green fields and a moat, and it's all very peaceful here. Or I may be in London, so I live between the two, but I'm mainly here because I've got 2 lovely children and a dog and a husband, and my children go to school in this area.
Lovely. And so when you do your retreats, you said you can do them around the world. Sort of how many do you do in the year, and what sort of places are you travelling to? Is it quite a lot of travel?
It's a lot of travel. Last year I clocked up, I think, about 50.
Wow.
And so just to give you an idea, I vent from something like bronze to gold status on British Airways miles very, very quickly. I felt a bit like George Clooney and Up in the Air. But yes, I do travel a lot, and I have been trying to cut that down a little bit. And I could be anywhere from sort of Istanbul to Petra to Greater Europe. Because these guys that I work with, I usually work in groups of about 8 to 10. They'll select a venue, and that could be anywhere, usually somewhere where they want to go, where they want to relax, and I go over and work with them there.
Lovely. So I'm intrigued because I don't do anything near as exciting as you, but I do travel a bit and run sort of all day sessions when I'm speaking or training, and I find
sometimes it can be a bit frustrating between having my lovely routine when I'm at home in my home office to then travelling, and I sort of drop the routine and I'm sort of in the moment wherever I am. But then I always find this period of sort of catch up when I get back, and it feels like everything's sort of upside down. How do you cope with that change in your routine all the time?
Do you know, that's such a good question, because there's two things going on. Firstly, it's my physical stamina and health, because as you can imagine, waiting for flights, sometimes they're delayed, don't always travel, business class. It can really, cause you quite a lot of fatigue, wear and tear. And the best trips are where there's no delays. I'm sitting right at the front of the flight. I've learnt over the years to pack very lightly so I can whiz straight off. But I'd say one of the most important things for me is sleep. I make sure if I'm arriving at a client venue, they often invite me for supper the night before a retreat. And I always check, is it at the hotel, is it at a restaurant near the hotel? Because, when 10 guys get together, they can start wanting it to go on longer. And I don't really want to be out until sort of 11, 12, 1 in the morning. So I usually say, as long as I can be home by, and I make that an absolute ground rule, and they will either put me in a taxi, if it's in a safe environment, or one of them will escort me home. So my sleep, I've got to get 7 hours sleep minimum. Mm-hmm. When I'm at home, I usually go for 8 hours sleep. That's a very big deal for me. I can't function if I don't have sleep.
Yeah.
When I'm at home, one of the things I find difficult is clicking back to my family life as a wife and a mum when I've had sort of guru status for 3 or 4 days. Yeah. And I'll sort of come back, and sometimes, I hope he's not listening to this, my husband will go, "What's for dinner?" or "Have you got the kids' uniform sorted?" Yeah. So, we've learnt over the years to sort of divide and rule. But I have some rituals I do that help that process be a little bit more seamless, shall we say, but it doesn't always work.
So tell us more about those. That sounds intriguing, because I agree with you. I have the same thing. It's what have we got for tea? And my response is usually, well, I don't know. What have you thought of? I wasn't here. But it doesn't really wash, does it?
Yeah. Okay, well, a couple of things. Firstly, I work on, with my clients a lot of the time on things like meaning and purpose and feeling sort of satisfied and fulfilled in life. And when I'm running on empty, because I've been out on the road, for a consecutive number of days or whatever, it's very important for me to stay connected to the home. And it's not always easy to phone and get a connection. So I started to feel quite neglected if my husband hadn't sent me a text or a nice email. And my husband being quite sort of male brain, if I send a message like, "How are the children, love you, miss you," or whatever, he might go, "Yes, they're all fine, and see you on Sunday." Something really cryptic.
Yeah.
So the impact on me can be, "Oh, he didn't say I love you and really miss you." Yeah. But it's not because he doesn't, it's just his style. So I had to give him feedback about that. And I said to him, if we can't speak, it's really important that I get a text from you, even if it's just a symbol of a heart and miss you or some little cryptic thing, so that I stay connected while I'm working. And, when I go to a break and I check my phone, there's some sort of connection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. My husband doesn't even send me text messages, so I think you're one step ahead there. He doesn't even reply to mine half the time. But yeah, I do exactly know what you mean. You do get that feeling of I'm in some sort of different world, which can be fun, and as you said, you're in some amazing places and so on. But it then is very difficult, isn't it, to sort of keep in with what's happening elsewhere. How old are your children?
My son's 13 and my daughter's 16, and although you'd think, well, a 16-year-old will take responsibility for things like cooking when mum is coming back, that doesn't always happen. In fact, it never happens. So the other thing, I don't know if you've read the lovely book called 5 Love Languages. I think it's by David Chapman.
I've had it recommended twice, and I haven't yet read it, and I must, and now third time lucky, I will. So yes, please do tell me.
Oh, okay, yes, you must read it. It's a very sweet little book, and it's a chap who's worked with couples, and he says we all have a different channel for receiving love, and he goes into 5 different channels, and one of the channels that I think is my channel is acts of service. So I don't necessarily need to have lots of, when I walk in, presents and being made a fuss over, but I do like acts of service. So if I walk in and my husband says, I've cooked you a lovely meal and it's in the Arga waiting for you when I come home at 11, or I open the fridge and it's full of food and I'm not expected to go to Waitrose the moment I walk in, it feels good. But that wasn't happening. When I read that book, I realised it's really important for me, because he's quite sort of male and thinks, oh, well, she'll have eaten on the flight.
Yeah.
So now he always says, will you want to eat when you get home? And he always makes sure that there's something for me. And even if I don't eat it, it's the gesture of knowing someone's bothered. Because when you walk in after having given a lot of myself, heart and soul, for 3 or 4 days, and I walk in and the fridge is bereft and there's nothing left for me and everyone's asleep, it can feel a bit poverty-stricken. So that's something I've explained to him, and I now know his channel, and so I can make sure that I give him what he needs as well.
Yes, I'm off to read that book now. I have had it recommended, as I say, a few times. So I think that, because I sound similar to you in that that's the sort of thing that would make a big difference to me. So I need to find out what my husband's is, and then I can have that conversation.
Yeah, and a lot of the men I work with, might say things. I mean, they don't actually use this phraseology. My wife doesn't understand me. But I think they are so busy travelling and running these complicated businesses and lives that it must be really tough when they go home to a wife that isn't involved in those projects. Which is why the typical, scenario is a lot of men will maybe have an affair or something like that. But it's usually less to do with lust and more to do with that person shares their life day to day. And what I often say to people is the rocks of a good marriage are in joint projects.
Yes.
Because, yes, you have a project called, if you can call children project, you have that as a joint project. But, you've always got to have something exciting that you're working with together, whether it's a house refurbishment or planning, a longer-term holiday or big trip or something that dovetails purpose. Otherwise, when the children start to leave, you can be bereft of a joint purpose.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's a good point, yeah. So when you're you're either at home or you're travelling, do you have a sort of similar routine, or is it quite different? I mean, obviously you're in different places and sometimes things get in the way, but how do you sort of start the day? Is there any similarity there?
Well, when I'm travelling, it's a very clear routine, and I try to simplify my life. So I always use the same driver. He always picks me up, and I always charge the client for that chauffeur trip to the airport, because that completely demystifies the stress of trying to get to the place on time, etc. So I get driven to the airport. I check in if I'm checking in luggage. Otherwise, I go straight to the business class lounge. I sit down, relax, maybe have a healthy meal. And if I don't have time for that, I always buy a salad from Pret a Manger, and I take it on the flight, because if I start eating wheat and sandwiches and what I call polystyrene food on the flight, that's the first downer for me. And I can start to feel bloated, lethargic, and you get hungry when you're on a flight, so it's important that I go prepared. If I'm in business, then the food's usually a bit more choice and better. So I always take a salad with me on the flight, and I can see people looking over their shoulder a little bit jealous, that I've got a lovely salad niçoise while they're tucking into their plastic sandwich. And then when I get to the venue, I always check out the room I'm working in first. That brings my stress levels down, because I then know how much time I need to spend creating the space for this magic that's going to be happening. Invariably, it's not right. There's a boardroom table or something going on that isn't going to work for me. So I try and do all that long before we even arrive at the sort of morning. And then I go to my room. If I'm having to have dinner, then obviously I'll join the group for dinner. Otherwise, I usually order a healthy bit of room service if it's early enough and have an early night.
Yeah.
If I'm at home, it's a very different routine. I always get up very early because I'm best in the morning. And I come down normally before anyone else is up. I let my little dog Coco out, have a little walk around the garden, just get some fresh air. And then, this does sound really cheesy, but I do a gratitude process.
Yeah.
So as I walk the dog around, I breathe the air. I'm lucky enough to live in a beautiful place, and I just for a few minutes just go, oh, wonderful. What do I want from my day? And I ask myself, what do I want from my day today? How do I want to feel at the end of the day? What am I grateful for? What's working in my life? And I turn up the volume on some of those deeper questions, because it's a way of grounding myself and prepare myself for the next thing that I'm going to do, which is usually my outcomes list. And I come back in, Coco comes in, and I make myself a coffee, which is naughty, but I do. Lovely cappuccino or something. And then I sit down with a blank sheet of paper, and it's really important it's a blank sheet of paper that's a loose sheet of paper. Now, bear in mind, I will have done a lot of life planning, and I've got a lot of outcomes that I'm going for in the year. But every morning, I like to write my ideal outcomes down. And I ask myself, once I've made the list, is this in line with my purpose? Will doing these things make me feel satisfied at the end of the day and take me closer to what it is I want? Now, at the moment, I've just launched a book. So a lot of my to-do list is around becoming a bestseller, getting the message out there. This interview with you becomes a vital task for my day, because, you know, you had a bit of a delay today. I could have, if I had deemed this not to be vital, I could have just reprioritized it. But I have in my book I discuss the criteria that I use to decide how I use my time. And vital is when it's life-giving, as in it gives vitality to my purpose. It takes me closer to the thing I really want, the bigger thing, the big agenda. And if it's urgent, for instance, during this call, I know that we're having some marble delivered. That's something that was urgent, but something my husband can do. So it's understanding the difference between vital, that's going to really feed me and nourish me, and urgent, which is just yet another task that I have to do that's demanding my immediate attention. And knowing the difference between those is so important, because I can achieve much bigger chunks in smaller spaces of time, because I've defined what's vital, because it's in line with my purpose.
Yeah, I love that phrase, or that word, vital. It just sort of speaks so much. Makes it really clear about why you're doing, what you're doing. I really like that. I do a sort of gratitude thing in the morning, purely and simply because I read a tip from a guy called Tim Ferriss about an app, in fact, called My 5-Minute Journal, which I recommended on my newsletter a couple of weeks ago. And I just started doing that as a result of him doing it, not because I sort of particularly bought into the whole thing about it being, really important and a ritual start to the day and so on. But I'm finding it really useful, and it is the sorts of questions that you've just shared that are in there. But I haven't been, I don't think, clear enough with the things for today based on that purpose, and using that word vital, I think is really helpful. So thank you for that, because I'm going to take that away and improve my my gratitude session in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important for people to identify their purpose, and it doesn't have to be this long mystical journey. But I think if you understand what you're here to do, and it doesn't, as I say, have to be anything very spiritual or global or massive. It can be something quite normal. But I think clarity about your purpose really creates your whole sort of alignment of the way you use your day and the way you use your days, which lead to months to lead to years. And that purpose has to be re-energized, reviewed, and possibly changed, as your interests change and as your drivers change. But I think it's important to be able to sort of sit up and go, yeah, this is my purpose. This is what I love. This is what I do, and this is what I want to do. And I do have, actually, I don't know if it will help listeners. I have 4 or 5 key questions people can ask themselves that's very, very quick when they're trying to identify what's my purpose. Would you like to hear them?
Oh, yes, please, definitely.
Well, you've probably already heard that it's really important to have an elevator speech. So a when someone says, so what do you do? And I think what you answer at that point really defines you subliminally and to the other person. So some people can be very dismissive by using things like, oh, I just do, or they minimize their effect. So I think, the who you are, it's very important that you say that in a one-liner, and that when you read it back to yourself, you go, yeah, that's what I do. And it really does encapsulate, what you do as a gift to the world. Whether it's, I cleanse toilets so that when people come in, they have an uplifting experience. I do charitable work all over the world. It doesn't really matter as long as you've got clarity on why you're doing that. What is it? So who you are. Then what do you love to do? What are you supremely qualified to teach people?
Yeah,
it's a good question, because everyone's got some expertise. Whether it's fixing the electrics or walking kids to school or baking cakes, whatever is what you're really supremely qualified in doing. Who do you do it for? So my family, my kids, chief executives, whatever.
Yeah.
And when you're giving this gift of yours, what do people want from you? What are they wanting? And how do they change or transform as a result of receiving that gift from you or your contribution?
Mm-hmm.
And I think those questions are quite good ones to ask, because ultimately we do things for other people, ultimately, that in their own way feeds us. And that to me is the loop, because we think we're doing it for ourselves, but ultimately we do things in relationship and to make a contribution. And the more that we have visibility of that contribution, the more we feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, lovely. So purpose is sort of the key, the first thing. How do you then link that into what you're doing on a sort of monthly, weekly, daily basis? You've talked about your gratitude, I guess, ritual in the morning. How else do you turn that purpose into sort of real life and things getting done?
Well, one of the things I do regularly is I do life planning. And I do that on my own, but I also do it with my husband, and I started this years ago. And life planning is really when you look at all the key areas of your life, but coming from a point of fundamental core values. So, for instance, I've honed down my values to maybe 4 or 5 that I know that I can't breathe unless they're in my life. So they're not values like integrity, loyalty, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. They're values like love and connection, a sense of contribution, vitality and health, family, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I know friendship, good friendships. I know if they're not present in my life, part of me will start to shut down. So, for instance, if I've been in the field for ages, running around, doing retreats, etc., but I've really neglected my friends at home, I can start to feel really disconnected, isolated, a bit of what's the point of all this, so I know what the indicators are, and I don't need to bring myself back into that balance. Yeah. So that's the bigger aspect. And then I will literally want to achieve certain things in areas of my life, whether it's my personal environment, my health, my friends, my business, and then those get translated into, 5-year, 2-year, 1-year daily actions. And every phase of my life, I have a different focus. So, I said about 3 years ago, I want to write a book. So that's when the planning of that started. And now I've actually launched a book, it's been published, and I'm talking to you. And that wasn't a coincidence, that was planned. The stages were planned, and you need a bit of luck. But I always say to people, if they want something, they've got to be prepared to do the pedaling. The pedaling up the hill, the pedaling to the direction, and then something will pop up that may not be what they're expecting, but it may be even better than what they were looking for. But you have to have an intention to get somewhere, whatever that intention may be. And it could be around your kids, it could be something you're going for, like something like writing a book. So the ritual in the morning, when I've translated that, is what action can I do today to tick off on a vital level that purpose coming to fruition. So, for instance, years ago when I lived in a busy city, London, I had a yearning to be in the country, to have a quiet life, and that came from my value of serenity and tranquility. I really wanted calm, peace, serenity. And I decided that in order to have that, I needed to change my environment. I needed, 5-10 years from now to be living somewhere that nurtured me.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if my 10-year goal is to have a beautiful country house in Wiltshire, but now I'm in a flat in London, a very busy area, how can I get from there to there? Well, there's ways of translating that. And so I knew that on the Monday I had to do something specific to have that goal manifest. So what I did was I called Country Life and started to subscribe to the Country Life magazine. So every time that magazine entered my door on a Thursday, I think it was delivered, suddenly my future was in my present, and any action I took led me closer to that. And that's the way I kind of do it. And hey presto, I had the environment I wanted within about 5 years of setting that goal, not 10 years, because I took more focus over it.
Yeah. Lovely. So just sort of exploring that further. So you've got the life planning. We're talking about purpose. It sort of sounds fairly simple, as you say, to sort of make sure that what you're doing sort of fits with that on a daily basis. But of course, there's tons of actions that could be taken every day, and we've always got an overflowing to-do list, or certainly an overflowing list of things that perhaps might make it to the to-do list. How do you then hone that down from the life planning, the purpose, into the actual actions? And the example you gave with subscribing to the magazine, I guess, was a very maybe not obvious at the time, but now sounds quite an obvious next step. I suppose that's why it was a priority. It was a sort of early step, but then there were a lot of other things that you needed to do to go from there to living in Wiltshire. So how do you then make it happen? Do you plan projects or orders of events, or how does that work for you?
Well, I think different people respond to different things. When I coach people, I give them different ways of getting to the same answer, because a bit like spaghetti, some things work for some people and they don't work for others. I happen to be quite visual, so when I've got time and space and I'm going for something big, I don't have to life plan now for another 6 months because I've got some big things on my horizon. But if I get to that point of I've leveled out what next sort of energy, I may do a big vision board, for instance, where I'll cut out images of magazines and things that experiences I want to create in my life, whether it's tranquility, me doing a TED talk, writing a book, having fantastic figure, doing amazing yoga, whatever it may be that I want in my life, order. I will create that as an image personally. Other people may do it differently. They may do arrival points. They may describe it in a more kinesthetic way. But there's visual. There's how do you feel about things? What kind of feelings do you want to have in the future? Or you could indeed include auditory in that as well. But I think it's really important to have some sort of envisioned process. And in the book I've written, I talk about the importance of meditating and contemplating. Aristotle said the first stage of action is contemplation, because these pictures and images and feelings and sounds, they stimulate your kind of mind's eye and your imagination. Because if you can't imagine yourself having this life or this job or this relationship, you're never going to create it. So you have to first imagine it. Then you've got to really desire it, want it, and then you've got to tune in, and this is a really important part. You've got to tune in to all the negative voices, those little saboteurs in your head. I call them little rats, rational mind, saying you can't have it, you don't have a degree, or you can't write because you're dyslexic, or whatever. These limiting beliefs, you've got to be aware of those. because those will undermine you and those will keep you stuck. So knowing that they're going to be there, allowing them to surface, maybe even recording them in a journal or recorder, then you can transform them and you can start to get in control of them because you become more conscious of them.
Mm. Mm.
And once you've transformed those, that's an ongoing, moment-to-moment daily practice. You can't just transform them one day and that's it. But it gets easier as you start to believe in yourself more. So you would start in a macro way, with a vision board, a life plan, etc. And then, day to day, things become more simple. But one of the things I do is I don't do to-do lists. I do ideal outcomes. And I think that's a big shift. And it doesn't matter whether I'm going into a meeting or whether I'm facing my day of a million things to do. If I do a to-do list, I could be working all day and still feel dissatisfied at the end. Whereas if I do ideal outcomes and then ask myself, what do I want to feel like at the end of the day? What do I want it to give me at the end of the day? And out of all these things, which is going to give me the biggest delivery, I have to really force myself to make that my priority, because it's so easy to go into your office and spend the best part of your morning when you're freshest, well, certainly where I am, decluttering, doing a bit of admin, writing your bills, clearing the deck so that you can do the big thing, and you never get around to doing the big thing.
Yes, absolutely. So can you perhaps give
doing the big thing when you're energetic is great.
Yeah. So can you perhaps give us an example of what an outcome might be and what that might lead to doing during the day?
Yes, for instance, an ideal outcome may be I'm going to a meeting to talk to somebody about something I want to pitch to them as an idea.
Yeah.
Rather than going, well, I need to get them to sign off this, I need an agreement for that, which puts pressure on a specific thing, like getting a signature. I go, wouldn't it be great if that person said, let's collaborate? I imagine that person sort of shaking my hand and smiling and going, do I really just want this signed off, or do I want X? And then I try to envision, that's not giving you a great example, is it? Because it's probably not going to be familiar to a lot of people. Let me think again about something more specific as an ideal outcome. Well, I might, for instance, want to create something special for my kids when they're coming home if I've been on a trip.
Yeah.
So I go, what's my ideal outcome? And I want, when they walk through the door, to have a big smile on their face. So one of the things I'd make sure is I've clocked off from my working day in time to get their favourite food, create a lovely meal, lay the table beautifully, maybe buy them a little treat, and be in a high energy state when they walk through the door.
Yeah.
So what they see is Mummy running towards them with her arms open and smiling faces. But it's very subtle. If they walk in and I'm on my computer and I haven't made eye contact, hi darlings, be with you in a second, I've ruined it.
Yes.
Because the first thing they've seen is Mummy letting them know they're not a priority.
Yeah.
And little things like that make huge differences, even in couples, because I do some couples work. And so much pivots on the greeting.
Yes.
You think about it, if you walk in and someone's on there, whether it's a meeting or a social chat or whatever, if someone's finishing off an email before they've got time to look up and smile at you, how does that feel? It diminishes you, doesn't it?
I love that phrase. I heard it the other day on a TV program, or it was in a book I read or something about so-and-so was diminished. And I thought, I love that phrase. I must remember that. And it came up again.
And they can spend the next 2 hours validating you, making you feel good, but nothing compares to you going, hi, I'm here for you. And I always make sure with my clients, as far as I can, that the first greeting is so important in the morning, and when they walk through the door, they're the most important thing in my life.
Yeah.
I don't want them walking in while I'm checking off a text, and I'm distracted for a second. It just sends off the wrong signal.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's answered your question. The ideal outcome is imagining how I want the impact to be on the other person, and what's that going to give me? Because what's my ideal outcome? Well, my ideal outcome is to have my children feel happy and feel that they're the centre of my universe.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
versus I need to go to Waitrose and buy the food.
Yeah.
I need to clean the house and I need to lay the table.
Yeah. It does help, and I think I do use to-do lists, but what I find myself doing quite often is completely ignoring my to-do list and probably working on the basis of an outcome without realising, and doing some of the things from the list even though I haven't been checking it, because they contribute to that outcome. So I think it's really key, because we normally do know what we need to do. We don't necessarily need to list things down if we know what the end result needs to look like, because some of that stuff will come naturally through the things that you just do, because you know you need to do them for that to happen. So I think that was really helpful. Thank you. So we've talked quite a bit about health throughout the interview without focusing on it. So you've mentioned sleep, and you've talked about nutrition, taking your salads on the plane with you. You mentioned yoga, you mentioned meditation. It sounds like it's something that you do have a focus on. Would that be the case?
Yes, I mean, I don't always have time to go to a yoga class, and sometimes I'm found in my hotel room. But I thought, I work with, a lady who has helped me over the years. But I thought everybody can do 3 asanas, or asanas, however you want to pronounce it. So before I go to bed, I always do a couple of salutations, a downward facing dog, a cat, if nothing else, to ease off the strain because I've been on a flight or whatever. And then I do those in the morning as well. So it just becomes a routine, a little bit like brushing your teeth. And at the moment something becomes a routine, that's brilliant, because it's part of your daily action that you don't even think about anymore.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say, I do tons of fitness, because I don't, but I do when I'm home, always walk the dog, I go for a swim, I belong to a gym. Don't like doing too much gym, but I do the basics. I'll attend a yoga class. Another one is a mind, body, spirit, because I love that. If I have time, I'll do potentially a body pump or something a bit more physical and active. But I try and do something at least 3 or 4 times a week that takes me into a movement, a little action. I wouldn't say I was frenetic or a fanatic. My husband's a fanatic. You can't talk to him unless he's been to the gym for 2 hours. I'm not like that. And I wouldn't say I'm naturally, it doesn't come easy to me, to go to the gym and be active. And I'm not like the goddess energies of Carl Jung, Artemis. Some people like the goddess Artemis, who's goddess of the wild, is always running. Those girls who are always running or doing a marathon. I'm not that type.
Yeah.
So I have to work at it. I'd be lying if I didn't. But for me, it's really important that I feel attractive in my body. I'm presenting all the time, so I've got to feel good in my body. And it makes me feel more attractive when I've nurtured myself. And whether that's walking, eating properly, or whatever, but I'm not a saint. I still like a glass of wine in the evening, and my naughty, very expensive chocolate that's 60-70% cocoa. I love a little bit of chocolate. I have a glass of wine, but I do the regular things well. I don't eat pasta. I don't have bread. I don't do that kind of thing.
That's still part of the whole nurturing, I think. The wine and chocolate. It's definitely part of nurturing.
Yeah, well, get a life, I always say to people, I could be jacking up with heroin, but no, I'm having a glass of wine. And also, when I've had a really good day, it's so lovely to sit down with a client and have a lovely glass of wine, and, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Treat yourself. I always say a little bit of what you fancy does you good, and I personally find people who overdo that balance. I think it was in Star magazine a few weeks ago. It's the opposite of being unhealthy, but it's becoming a syndrome. It's addiction to healthy food.
Yeah, orthorexic was the word for it. Yes,
that's it.
Yeah.
And I've met a lot of those people, and some of them are really unhappy. So,
yeah, exactly. So, what about learning and improving yourself? I guess you probably do that as part of your work anyway, and your lifestyle by the sound of it. What sort of things do you do?
I love learning. I'm always either reading an article or reading a book. I think it's part of my duty to keep myself fresh. So I often listen to great TED Talks. I think they're brilliant because you can get a pulse of some new ideas very, very quickly listening to a TED Talk. I normally would, within a year, do a seminar, attend a seminar myself. I really love being in the situation where I'm not running it and I'm listening and growing myself. So I'll probably do 1 or 2 of those, a workshop or something. I also have a connection to other facilitators, and there is a conference, once a year where we share know-how and we chill and resource each other. And I belong to various peer groups where we connect in and we talk about whatever it is. So, for instance, I've just written a book. I have several different places now that I tap into with other authors, because I think it's very, very important when you're learning and growing that you create a peer group that has similar goals, because then you're in with the right crowd. Because, for instance, if you want to lose weight and you're with your mates, in inverted commas, and you say, no, I'm not drinking, I'm on a bit of a regime, and they'll go, oh, come on, we love you the way you are, can't you give up drinking after the hen do? Or that kind of thing. It's not very supportive. So I find that people who've never written a book don't understand people who've written a book. It's one of those challenges. You've just got to have done it. But the conversation with people who've gone through that particular challenge is a very, very different ballgame. And you've got to surround yourself with people you want to become like.
Yeah, absolutely. So what about if things don't go right? What about if your day doesn't quite pan out as you were planning? How do you deal with that?
You mean when I've hit a barrier?
Yes.
Well, this is another thing that I talk about in the book, because we all hit barriers, and I've honed it down to some specific emotions, and you have to become a little bit of a robot, because you've got to learn to decode yourself. So the key emotions anyone hits in the day, and certainly I do, is apathy, where you can't be bothered. And you have thoughts like, what's the point? I can't be bothered. I sometimes hit that in the morning, when I've arrived somewhere, I'm jet lagged. For me, it's in the middle of the night, but the alarm's gone off and it's 6 o'clock and it's, oh no. The first thing I may hit is apathy. And the thoughts are, what's the point? I just really can't believe that's the time. And at that point, I go, that's interesting. I'm in apathy and I'm having these sort of thoughts. So then I tell myself, set a short-term goal. And the short-term goal for me at that moment is shower, coffee. Shower, coffee. So at that point, I physically move, and there's a big, big hint there. You have to physically move so you change your resource state. You become more kind of motivated as you physically get yourself out of the bed, walk to the shower, and then I'm in a whole new realm because I've moved. My thoughts are changing to, hey, I wonder who I'm going to meet today. And great, where's the coffee machine? Can I work it? Because they're all different in these hotels. And then suddenly I'm in a different space. But so you may hit apathy. You may hit that very, very common one, it's not fair. Why me? Why does this keep happening to me? And I know through practice that's me being a victim. And when I'm being a victim, I know I can't change things. So I have to somehow do some positive self-talk and move myself out of grief into what can I do about the situation. And I really highly recommend tuning into the thoughts you're having when you're in these barriers, because they're always different. You'll have different thoughts in apathy to when you're in grief, to when you're in fear, to when you're in anger, to when you're in pride. So pride is just as much of a stuck position as all those others. And so I work with people to understand the typical ones they fall into and how they can get better at moving out of that. But the fundamental principle is move, go for a run, walk, just literally change your energy, up your energy, and focus on the short-term goal. And then you're in breakthrough, you're in a sort of I can, I will world. Unless it's something heavy like someone's died, in which case you have to give yourself time to grieve. But even there, you still have to get to a point of moving forward with your life and going, I have to accept it now and move forward. But I'm talking about the sort of day-to-day barriers that we hit because you had a bad phone call or your boss was horrible or you missed your train and it screwed up your whole day, those sort of barriers.
Yeah. So on a day when you actually have had a good day, you end the day knowing that you've had the chance to live more, and I call it, I describe living more as getting to do the things that you want to do rather than the things that you feel you should do or you have to do. What have you done? What does that day look like for you?
Well, actually, I've just had a fantastic day on Saturday. It was one of those days where I was being interviewed in London by radio. I think it was Monocle 24, that's what it's called. And I'd never had this experience before in London. And I said to my husband, I've got an interview, I've got to be in London at 1, and we live in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
And he said, so will you be taking the train? That's our first barrier. And I said, well, I thought it might be fun if we just went down together. And he said, should we leave the children, because I've got a dog? And I said, no, wouldn't it be lovely for them to come with us? And he and Bella, my daughter, 16-year-old, did her grunt and said, no, I don't want to go 2 hours on the drive with them. And kind of very long story short, I managed to enroll them into my little vision for the day, knowing that it could be a real damn squib and didn't know what to expect. But we went down for the day. I walked in. The Georgina Goodwin of that radio station was wonderful and allowed them to sit and listen in the actual radio room.
Yeah.
So they saw Mummy being interviewed for about 20 minutes live.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely fantastic. They were fascinated. They had a lovely morning. And then we took them to, had a lovely walk around the shops. And then we went to the Hard Rock Cafe, where they were allowed to have anything they wanted on the menu. And I said to them, you can either have a drink, a milkshake, or you can have a pudding, but you can't have both.
Yeah.
And then, lucky for me, by the end of their triple burger, they didn't have room for anything else. But we had a lovely day, and it was those two worlds merging, where my business life, if you like, and my personal life just worked beautifully together. And we came back, we were absolutely shattered. And my son said, is it my bedtime yet, Mummy? Because I'm absolutely knackered. I said, yes, you can go to bed. So that was a really lovely day.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds good. It's funny when children actually ask to go to bed. You've done a good job in the day. I think my daughter's asked me about twice in that
you're doing
night.
something right.
Lovely. Oh, it sounds really good. So it sounds like you're doing lots of radio-style interviews.
They're starting to happen, Jo. Yeah, they're just starting. So I think this is about the third one I'm doing.
Yeah.
And because the book only came out last week.
Yeah, lovely. So I was just about to move on to how can people find out more about you, but perhaps the lead into that is tell us a bit more about the book. You've mentioned it as we've gone through. So what it's about? What's it about? How can it help us?
Absolutely. Well, it's called Motivate Yourself, and the strapline is Get the Life You Want, Find Purpose and Achieve Fulfillment. And it's a book that is absolutely practical. It's a step-by-step guide. It's based on 20 years of experience in the field, and all these processes I've used with live groups and got people to work through it. But I've distilled it into 3 sections. The first section is finding out who you are at your core, what your core values are, what lights you up. And it's not that easy, actually, for some people. So there's a number of different processes that take you to that answer. Then the second section is about understanding what gets in the way of your happiness. And that is including, your own rational mind, your subliminal belief system, where you got them from, and it's identifying all those things and starting to literally rewire yourself, which sounds painful, but it isn't. But it does you do have to do the work. You have to sit there and do the work with a journal or with a recorder or your iPhone. You can't just sort of read it and expect it to descend upon you from grace. You've got to actually physically do some of the thinking processes. And then the final piece is the practical designing your life plan bits. And I end up with 10 motivational principles. And one of my favourites is be positive, choose to be happy.
Lovely. I like that, choose to be happy. I put something on Facebook the other day about trying really hard to be happy, and somebody said that sort of doesn't make sense. You're not supposed to be trying really hard. And it's like, well, what I mean is, creating situations and a life where I am happy. It's not that it's a difficult thing as such, but it is definitely a mindset thing, isn't it?
Well, you can be attached to the drama.
Yes.
You can be attached more to the argument than I could just choose to be happy here.
Mm.
So it's that letting go process. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's some nice, neat little 10 principles at the back, which I quite like. They're a little bit like my mini desiderata. But the other one is make sure you're leaving your comfort zone on a regular basis, because this is where the magic is.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you're doing, whether you're skiing or whether you're going for something bigger, if you're not challenging yourself a little bit every day, you know, you start to go really flabby on all levels. Certainly around the middle.
Yeah. So tell us more about how people can get hold of the book and how they can contact you and how they can connect with you.
Well, the book's published by Capstan. It's a Wiley brand, and it's available on Amazon, which is very easy. And they can get hold of me. I've got a website, androdonovan.com. And Andro is Andro, so that should be quite straightforward. And Donovan is Donovan, not the other way round. And so they can get the book on Amazon, come to my website. I'm going to be developing all sorts of little freebies and tips, and if you become a subscriber, then we can stay in touch.
Lovely, thank you. Really appreciate your time today, Andro. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's always good to interview people who are sort of working with some of the self-improvement sort of side of things anyway, because then we tend to go deeper into that side of things and probably less about technology and apps and things that I might do with other people. So it's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you for joining me.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. And just the final thing I wanted to say is somebody sent me a postcard. This is when I was having a very difficult retreat last year, and it said, "Don't forget to be awesome." And I keep that on my bathroom mirror, so that I just check in. If I'm feeling a little bit in a low energy state, I look at that and it sort of lifts my spirit. So anything you can do by giving yourself a little placard to, give yourself that little kick is great. But I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to speaking to you again sometime, Jo.
Lovely, thank you.
Use your power to live more.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. We're back publishing weekly now, having had a bit of a gap. Part of the reason was that I was struggling to get the show notes done in time to enable me to have a weekly publishing schedule. And that has been alleviated massively by me now working with Lidwell Writing Services, who are pulling together some amazing show notes for both the podcast pages on my website, but also to use within my subscription site for members to be able to delve deeper into each of the interviews in an easy way without having to listen back to the whole interview. So we're back on a weekly publishing schedule, so very excited about that. The interviews will be every other week, and on the week where we don't have an interview, I will share some of my own thoughts and ideas, but also I'll give you a bit of a roundup of the key points that have come out the previous week in the interview. So like we used to have with the Joe's Gems, I'll be doing that, but I won't be doing that at the end of an interview because that makes the podcast sort of extra long. I'll wait until the following one just to give you a bit of a recap, which I think from a sort of learning point of view should be helpful as well with that sort of gap. So you'll listen to the interview, get the salient points, the key points from the interviewee, but then also have a second sort of bite of the cherry a week later where I can pull out those key points for you in Joe's Gems. So looking forward to publishing weekly, as I say, moving forwards. So all the information for today's podcast is available on the show notes on the website, and that's powertolivemore.com / in this case 27. If you'd like to sign up to get my regular emails with more tips, strategies, ideas and tools to improve your power, you can do that by going to powertolivemore.com / productivity apps, where you can download my free report with the best apps you can use on your smartphone to improve your productivity. And if you want to find out about my subscription service with all the resources recommended on the podcasts and in my newsletter, organised by topic, as well as online courses and templates for you to use for business planning and blogging, so you can take the DIY option to working on your power, then go to powertolivemore.com / subscription. Or you may have a more specific need or just want to talk to me about how I can help you. If that's the case, you can book in for a free call with me by going to powertolivemore.com / power chat. Again, the link for this show is powertolivemore.com/27, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.